Hello and welcome back to my channel Learn SST. I hope you guys are taking good care of yourself. So let's get started with the next lesson of U.A.E SST for grade 9 from unit 3, lesson number 4, the Trucial States leading up to nationalization. So here we have the learning outcomes. To identify the key leaders of the Emirates during the 19th and 20th century, to understand the transitional role of the Trucial States in building of a nation, understand the resolve of Emirati people to live through hardships of World War II, and to know about the transitions, that is the changing of the economy from fishing, trading and pearls to an oil producing economy. This is a warm-up question from the textbook. Please go through. Please subscribe to Learn SST. Here you can see the blue box which shows you the timeline of the maritime treaties. Below that, let us see the content. British attacks on Ras Al Khaimah and other towns. In two separate attacks, the British used Marines, that is the army and the naval forces, to attack and burn to the ground buildings and towns of Ras Al Khaimah and other coastal towns in the southern Gulf region. So they started with all these attacks, burning down of the buildings and destroying the beautiful town of Ras Al Khaimah and other coastal towns in this region of southern Gulf region. Why? Because they wanted to have a signing of the treaty. So they made a ground which would be conducive for the signing of the treaty. So after destroying the local ships of the Qawasin, the Omani towns, they forced the signing of the General Maritime Treaty of 1820. The details you can see it in your textbook on page 122. The Emirates of Dubai and how it was established or it was formed. So in 1830, Sheikh Maktoum ibn Batti established the Emirate of Dubai. By 1833, the Al Maktoum family relocated in Dubai. So they shifted, or rather they migrated from Abu Dhabi into the region of Dubai. In 1894, Sheikh Maktoum bin Hashr Al Maktoum, he became the ruler of Dubai. Over the next few generations, Dubai grew and it developed its port. So the details you can see it on page number 126. The British arrival, interference in the Gulf region from the year 1853 till the formation of the Union in 1971. So in 1853, the British forced local coastal rulers to sign the Perpetual Maritime Treaty. So according to this particular treaty, that is Perpetual Maritime Treaty, which we have done in details in the previous lesson, you can go through that. In 1892, a new treaty called the Exclusive Treaty of 1892, that gave the British a monopoly, that means a complete control. So they were only the one who could have the control over the ships which could sail from the Gulf ports, and it limited the size of it and the number of the ships, and it forced the local residents, that is the seamen, to obtain permits after paying a hefty amount or fees for the right to sail and trade in that region. So this was, what should I say, it was sheer injustice which was meted out to the local people over there. The foreigners, they come into the region, they invade the region, and then they force a treaty on the people in which the locals have to seek the permission from a foreign ruler so that they can trade, they can sail, and they can carry on their activities on the ports. Now over here we have the sequence of the events in which you can see over here Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan and the founding of the U.A.E in 1971. The details of it is given over here, that in 1971 till the time of his death in 2004, he was the president, rather the first president of U.A.E, born in the year 1919. Next is he became the ruler of the region of Abu Dhabi in 1966. Japan invents cultured pearls. In 1928, the Japanese they invented a method of raising oysters, and those oysters were raised in the sea farms. So they were the oysters which were like how you have the agriculture in which it is purposely grown, the crops are grown. In that same manner, the raising of the oysters were done by the Japanese in 1928. And this new technology created a plummeted in the price. So it brought about a demand for what? Demand for the pearls, and ended the profit of the local industry. So the local industry over here in UAE, which was actually a very traditional occupation of the people that has been prospered for 7,500 years, slowly and steadily it started becoming, or it started declining rather. Airport in Sharjah in 1932. So the first airport in this particular region was established in the region of Sharjah. In 1950 to 1939, that is the World War II and the aftermath, that is after this region, after this time. So the UAE experienced severe hardships during World War II, and that is the year from 1939 to 1945, as food shipments from India were diverted or transferred away from the seaports to support the British and the Allied armies in their fight against the Germans and the Italians. So actually, if you see, it was purely a European war, and later on even America had joined in the war, and the consequences or the problems were faced by the Asians, because Asian countries were the colonies of the Britishers. So they were facing the brunt of it. The Trucial Scouts from 1951 to 1971. The Trucial Scouts were the first modern security forces which acted to protect. And what did they protect? They protected the ports, the airports, the border regions, and so on. These local Emirati soldiers would become the core and founding military leaders of the new UAE. So the Trucial Scouts actually gave them a training so that in future they could become the military leaders of the new country, UAE. Armed forces after the UAE was established in 1971. Here we have a combination of the efforts. So let us see that there were many leaders of the past who also deserve recognition for their part in shaping the nation of UAE. In Abu Dhabi, Sheikh Diab bin Isa made the momentous decision. And what was that decision? The most important decision, and that was taken in the year, say, 2050 years before the establishment of the new settlement of Abu Dhabi that now serves as UAE's capital. So Sheikh Bat bin Diab and Sheikh Zayed bin Khalifa provided steady leadership for most of the 19th century, and under Sheikh Zayed, the Emirate of Abu Dhabi became the most important power in the area. The cautious, that is a very careful steps taken by Sheikh Bad bin Sultan managed to bring about the emirate from those harsh periods of the world, that the world was facing economic depression in 1929, and then the ongoing Second World War. So all this was actually the harsh period in the history of the world, to the beginning of the new era of the oil production and the wealth that followed after the Second World War. In Dubai, Sheikh Maktoum bin Batti established the emirate in 1830s. Its subsequent, that is the gradual growth to become a trading center, owed much to the wisdom of Sheikh Maktoum bin Hashir. So the credit goes to Sheikh Maktoum bin Hashir. So he was the one who made this particular region of Dubai the trading hub. Then his son Sheikh Saeed bin Maktoum continued this process, leading Dubai into the new opportunities of the 1950s. So, this was the prosperous thinking of these rulers of Dubai, and that's the reason it has got amazing opportunities available now, and it is the most beautiful region, and the region which people can just dream of working over there and living over there. In the north, Sheikh Rahma bin Matar al-Qasimi created the Qawasin state in the first half of the 18th century. He laid the foundation of what is the major regional power, and that it became the foundation of the regional power. And half a century later, that is 50 years, almost approximately 50 years later, Sheikh Sultan bin Sakr al Qasimi led that state for more than 50 years. Slowly, it changed from a major regional naval power to a key partner in the founding of the UAE of today. So, these are the great leaders, rulers of various regions of UAE, and they have combined together in their own way of making what is UAE today. This is activity 1 from the textbook. Please go through. Let us see the increasing trade with the world. By the early 20th century, so to be precise, it is from 1900 to 1934, the establishment of a coastal service, that is the postal service, started. Second was the ports and the growth of the pearling trade. All this meant that the UAE's economy is expanding internationally. The goods coming into Dubai came to be exported to the other Emirates either through land route or through water, that is, either in small boats or overland. Connections between the individual Emirates, that is, the seven Emirates which were formed in 1971. So, prior to it, these individual Emirates, so connections between them strengthened. Links by sea with the rest of the Gulf, East Africa, and India also grew. These are the two types of connections to other emirates and also to the outside world were to remain important in eventual. Eventual is the slowly and gradual forging. Forging is the formation of the creation of a single country. Although the modern state was not to emerge for nearly 100 years. So it took time, because by 1971, in the late 20th century, we had the formation of UAE. But the seeds of this unity was sown long before. So there was a sense of local identity, and this played a very important role in the formation of the UAE in 1971. So people thought of themselves to be a part of Arabia and the Arabian Gulf, but also different from their neighbors in the region, different from the neighbors like Oman, Saudi Arabia, and so on. This identity was strengthened during these decades, during these years, but it didn't start then. That is, in the early 20th century. They did not have this particular idea or the planning in their mind that by 1971 there would be a formation of a country wherein all these seven emirates will come together. So that was not in their mind at all during this time. We can already see it emerge, it grew into the ancient history of the country. When we talk about Oman culture, or the period when Meliha was a powerful kingdom, the beginning of the 20th century looked like it would bring about prosperity to the UAE, built upon this long tradition of trade, economy, and a community. However, the dark clouds of the war were on the horizon. Dark clouds of the war, it meant the Second World War, which started in the year 1939 and ended in the year 1945. Now let us see World War One and the 1920s. The outbreak of World War One, to be precise from 1914 to 1918, brought conflicts to the regions as the British forces fought against the Ottoman Empire in Iraq and Palestine. The UAE was not directly involved in the war. However, its position between the Middle East and India made it strategically important. Why? Because it was the location, and that location made it important. There were also some changes which you can see in the Arabian Gulf region during this time. So, although UAE was not involved in the war, but since it was a trucial state of Britain, it got involved into the war indirectly. In case of India also, India was a colony of the Britishers. They were not involved in this particular war in both the world wars. It was purely a European war, but still the colonies got involved. Why? Because they needed soldiers for the war. So Britishers took the soldiers from the Asian countries, from their colonies. They wanted the war material, the food supplies, all that was provided from these colonies. So eventually these colonies got involved. And then in the year 1902, a new Saudi state was formed in Riyadh, Riyadh being the capital of the Saudi country. It extended its control over eastern Arabia and then conquered the region of Mecca and the rest of the Hejaz region, that is the western Arabian region too, in 1920s. So by the end of World War One, that is by 1918, the major empires of the Central and Eastern Europe, as well as the Ottoman Empire, they collapsed. Fighting a world war is not a joke, it's not easy. So, slowly and steadily, their economies collapsed. This in turn affected the trade and the stability around the world. Obviously, there was then slowly and steadily, in within 10 years, there was a Great Depression, and that shook the world's economy. This marked the beginning of the tough times for the UAE that continued for several decades, for several years, for several 10 years. The UAE was particularly affected by the events far afield in Japan. So, in Japan also, there was a war which was fought over there, and especially the Japanese, they fought the Russo-Japanese war in 1904. After that, there was the in 1928 the Japanese, they began to harvest cultured pearls, and they were grown in their farms, special farms for kept for this purpose. And within a few years, these pearls had flooded the world market. So because of these events taking place, that is the World War One, the collapse of the economy of the world, then the Japanese harvesting the pearls, growing it in their special farms, all that affected UAE to a great extent. The result was that the catastrophe, that is the destruction for the Gulf's pearling industry. A small fleet of pearling dhows or those small boats used for this purpose continued to set out every year for another few years, but an industry that had first begun in 7,500 years ago slowly came to an end. Now let us see the leadership and the response in the UAE. The leaders and the people of the UAE, they showed their courage and resilience during this period. In 1928, Sheikh Bat bin Sultan became the ruler of Abu Dhabi. He ruled for nearly 40 years, and then he was succeeded by his younger brother, Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan, in 1966, who was to become the founding father of the UAE. So we all know the greatness of Sheikh Zayed, His Highness Sheikh Zayed, and how he played such an important role in the formation of the UAE in the year 1971. So in 1912, Sheikh Saeed bin Maktoum, he became the ruler of Dubai, ruling until 1958. These long lasting political reigns or the rule brought about stability in this region. In this time of uncertainty, it brought about stability because these were the rulers who were ruling so well in these regions. At the same time, as the community responded to the challenges, it embraced new connections with the outside world. A completely new and revolutionary technology, airplanes, became increasingly important after World War I, that is after 1918. They linked important towns and countries around the globe in a manner that was unimaginable just decades earlier. So, some years earlier, people could not imagine that after World War I, the the countries and the important towns would be linked with each other aerially, that is by good air connections. In 1932, an airport was established in Sharjah. This is a very important event and a year to remember. This was used for Imperial Airways, which later became British Airways, for transporting of the goods and people, and thus opened the country to the world beyond Middle East. So the aviation industry flourished. When the aviation industry grew, it brought about the movement of the goods easily to the far off destinations, so also the movement of the people. And then the people started looking beyond their own region. In Dubai, Sheikh Maktoum bin Bhatti established the emirate in 1830s. Its subsequent growth to become a trading center owed much to the wisdom of Sheikh Maktoum bin Hashar, who made Dubai a port that was friendly to business. So the countries which are open to business, they have got those policies which are economically friendly to the other nations. Those countries have developed and they are easy trading centers. So it is all because of the credit which goes to Sheikh Maktoum bin Hashar, who made Dubai a port which was friendly to business. His son Sheikh Saeed bin Maktoum, he continued that process, leading Dubai into the new opportunities of the 1950s. And in the north, Sheikh Rahma bin Matar al Qasimi, he created a Qawasin state in the first half of the 18th century. So, in this manner, slowly and steadily, you had the foresight of such great rulers who eventually paved a path for a very prosperous economy as well as the formation of these seven emirates into a union called as the U.A.E today. This is activity 2, very much from the textbook. Please go through. Let us see the oral history. The history which went on from one generation to the other by word of mouth. So most of what we know about the history of U.A.E comes from archaeological discoveries and texts. The texts are limited in number, though, and they cannot always be trusted to paint a complete picture, to give us a complete picture. The texts are very limited in number. So, to learn about the recent past of the country, we must look at the oral history. So, oral history, what exactly is that? Oral history is the recording of the people's own accounts. When I say accounts, is their story of their lives, the events which they have experienced. So, they had the first hand experience and which they have shared. So, through records. Then, given the speed with which the U.A.E has changed in recent years, oral history is particularly important as it is giving us a complete insight, a complete picture into the society that was very much different just 50 years ago. So, what modern U.A.E has emerged in 50 years ago, it was not the same thing. It was not the same case. In 2008, the President, His Highness Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, he issued a federal law. He came up with a law which was common to all the emirates of UAE. establishing an oral archive at the National Center for Documentation and Research, now called as National Archives. So, archives are something which is the past and the past events which are properly structured and organized and kept as a record for future. This important institution continues to interview and record the stories of the people and their lives to those of the Emiratis who witnessed the profound, great changes that occurred throughout the region in the last 70 or 80 years. So it is the first hand experience of the people and how the Emirati local people have recorded. So it is taking the interviews of the people and what have they witnessed in these 70 to 80 years in the UAE has been recorded for future use. You don't have to be an historian to be involved in this. Speaking to your parents and grandparents about their lives and what the country was like when they grew up is a great way to learn about the UAE's history. Now let us see 1939 to 1950s, that is World War II and its aftermath. What had happened after World War II? So despite the political stability in the year say 1930s onwards, the UAE's leaders and the people faced new challenges, and the challenges which cropped up, which grew. Why? Because of the world politics. In 1939, Germany invaded Poland. So that was the time of the outbreak of the Second World War. And that sparked the beginning of the World War II. Although there was no fighting in the UAE, it did not escape the impact, the effect of this World War II. The airport in Sharjah, it became the base for the British Royal Air Force, RAF. So they had their military base in this particular region of Sharjah, and it played a very important role in connecting British and the American forces. For which region? For North Africa and India. So off the east coast, a German submarine was sunk by a British plane, and this war meant that the sea routes to India were disrupted, completely destroyed, or you can say completely brought to a brink or to an end, affecting the import of foods to UAE. So in the space of say 2 years, from 1941 to 1943, the prices of the rice tripled as a result of the shortage. So there was a need for rice, but the rice was not available in this region of UAE. Why? Because of the war going on. Although India and UAE was not involved in the war, but since Britain and Germany were enemies of each other and they were fighting wars, that's the reason the sea route between these two countries was completely disrupted. To make matters still worse, there was a drought, and that drought which lasted for several years, which began in 1940s. So the drought conditions which were there in India had a lot of impact in UAE. Many Emiratis alive today remember these times. The records kept by the British officials in the country at that time paint a very dark picture, a dark picture of that situation which was so serious in those days. In 1941, one noted that there was no rain except for a few drops since last year, and the situation is serious. So in 1941 there was a drought. In fact, the cattle, then the camels, and all such things were emancipated. Uh, Conditions that if the rain doesn't occur in the next few weeks, then it is definitely going to be a situation in which the things will perish. Okay. And there was cold also in the region at the same time. There was drought like conditions. During this period, the British had controlled much of the economy and the international affairs of the country. This desire for control was not matched with the willingness to develop infrastructure, such as the schools, roads, and buildings, and hospitals. All these things, they were not doing any kind of these things so that the drought kind of situations or the present scenario could be dealt with effectively. Sometimes the British used their position for outcomes that were only beneficial to them, not to the local people. When Sheikh Zayed he came to power, he ensured that all the country's wealth was used for developing the land and its people. So extreme poverty became a fact of the life for many people. So looking back, there was perhaps one of the toughest times in the country's history, and that was the time of this World War and after World War. So today we take many more things for granted in UAE, especially the technology and the luxuries which we have at our disposal. So we should not forget the past. Even India had faced a lot of problems, and it was a drought kind of situation even in India. And the older generation who remember these tougher times are more aware of how much the country has changed in such a short period of time. So the credit goes to all these great leaders who came forward and made UAE what it is today. The Trucial Scouts. So let us see the achievement and the role of them. Security was an important concern during these decades. So in 1951, a local military force that was to become known as the Trucial Scouts was established. Initially, it had British officers as well as the officers from other Arab countries like Jordan, and was headquartered at Sharjah Airport, then which was only the airport in the country during that time. Initially consisting of a fewer than 100 men, the force rapidly it expanded itself, and it was funded by the British government, but served the local rulers and the people along with the newly formed local police forces. So the Crucial Scouts were playing a very great role in bringing about the law and order of the country and protecting the country from any attacks. So it was the British officers as well as they were the Arab officers from countries like Jordan, and they were all headquartered at the Sharjah airport. The local recruits benefited not just from the regular salaries but also from the basic training. So they were getting the training, they were getting education, and that was also helping the local UAE people, which paved the path for 1971. It became the core of UAE's armed forces. After the establishment of UAE Federation, so many of its soldiers became a high-ranking officers in 1950s and 1960s. So this Trucial Scouts slowly and steadily paved a way for UAE armed forces, and this armed forces was formed only after the union in 1971, when UAE became a federation or a country of its own. The emerging Trucial States. The aftermath, that is the after effects and the time or the period after World War II, brought about great changes in the Middle East and South Asia. India and Pakistan, they became independent from Britain in 1947. So a lot of changes were brought about after World War II in the Middle East as well as in South Asia. Like India and Pakistan, they became separated and they became an independent state from Britain in 1947. Then slowly and steadily Sri Lanka followed a year later. It also became a free nation. Then British influence in UAE also changed. This provided an opportunity for the beginning of the local government to emerge. So in 1952, the Trucial States Council was formed. This brought the rulers of the different emirates together twice a year. And why did they come twice a year? To hold discussions on variety of topics, including nationality laws and travel documents. A Trucial States Development Fund was also created, which helped the leaders to plan future developments in infrastructure. So whenever you have an administration, you need funds, and you need funds so that the meetings could be held, so that the new infrastructure could be developed for the betterment of the nation. So the seeds for the formation which led to the UAE in 1971 was laid in 1952 when this Trucial States Council was established. Education and health were the particular focus for investment. So they wanted to invest more and more money so that the people can get good education and also get good health facilities. Although it was many decades before the formation of the GCC, the countries of the Arabian Gulf assisted each other, they helped each other during this time. Kuwait provided important aid for the UAE, especially in health and education in the northern Emirates. By 1959, the modern schools existed in several parts or in several places across the country. As education spread, the people became more and more aware of the events elsewhere in the region. So education brings about a development of human mind, and also it helps them to tackle with the situation. So they started understanding what the events were taking place not only in their region but also in the other regions. The concept of Arab nationalism started spreading across the Middle East and also helped to stimulate. It brought in new ideas about the future. The political structure of the UAE also began to take shape. So slowly and steadily you have the shaping of the UAE. So in 1952, Fujairah secured a recognition as a separate emirate. For decades it had effectively governed itself, but it did not get this particular status of a separate emirate. But slowly and steadily in the year 1952 it got that recognition. Although technically it was considered to be a part of Sharjah, this brought about the new emirates, that is the number of emirates to 7. Increased political organizations such as the Trucial States Council and the possibility of the oil in the country also brought about this renewed interest from the Britain. So in the year 1950s and 1960s, the British political agents similar to today's ambassadors were appointed in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. So these were the conducive environment or the atmosphere which was created so that slowly and steadily the formation of the Union of UAE could be formed in the year 1971. So these political agents, which we call them as ambassadors today, were appointed in 1960s and in 1950s in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. That in 1960s and in 1970s you have the discovery of the oil. The people of the UAE had exploited various resources throughout their history. During this an-Nar period, the copper of Al-Hajar mountains were used and they were sent to Mesopotamia, bringing about great wealth to the people, to the country. The invention of Falaj in the Iron Age allowed the people to access, they can get easy availability of water which was buried deep into the ground so that it could bring about the development of crops and especially the dates. As a result, the oases grew in Al Ain and other places. Then the pearling industry, which started 7,000 or say 7,500 years ago, flourished until the recent past. The country has therefore always had resources. So resources in the form of copper or in the form of water which was buried deep inside, then the dates, then the pearls, all this was there in this particular region of UAE. When when used carefully, they have provided wealth and opportunities for the people. Oil is no different. So this is also the recent natural resource and that has changed the lives of the people. It has transformed the lives of the people. As early as 1922, people were aware of the possibility that UAE might contain vast quantities of precious resource, and this precious resource is none other but the oil. So the invention of the automobile and the other industries meant that the oil was in high demand. So foreign companies started flocking to U.A.E so that they can obtain concession agreements, and with those concession agreements, obviously that brought about prosperity to this region. So on 11 January 1939, Sheikh Shikbat, then the ruler of Abu Dhabi, has signed a milestone concession agreement which permitted oil explorations by foreign companies for 75 years. So for 75 years, the foreign oil exploration companies, they came into this region and they can extract oil from there. World War II delayed the search for oil, but after the end of this World War II, it began in earnest, in full sincerity. And in 1950s, several wells were dug, findings only minor traces of oil and natural gas. Then in 1959, commercial quantities of oil were finally found in Shaif, offshore from Abu Dhabi, and then the onshore at Bab the next year. So in a few years later, in 1966, oil was found in Dubai's offshore, that is the Fateh field, and the production began in 1969. And this brought about the prosperity to the region. This made the region quite wealthy. Sharjah followed with the discovery of the offshore in Mubarak field, where exports began in 1979. So all these emirates slowly and steadily got they could extract the oil. These foreign companies could come and extract the oil, and in this manner all the emirates started growing wealthy. This is activity 3, very much from the textbook. Please go through. Activity 4, this is matching the identity and the achievement of the various institutions. Please go through. So here I come to the end of my long video. I hope you like this video. It would be beneficial for you. If you have really liked my video, then please be generous enough to give me a like. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed as yet, and share it with your friends, with your classmates, with your relatives who would need this and would get benefited by my videos. See you next time with my new video. Till then, take care.